Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to this edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek. I wanted to cover a couple of things with you guys and bring you up to date. The Pest Geek Academy is coming along. However, it is taking a lot longer than we thought. We're still recording classes. We're still dealing with quizzes and setting up that infrastructure. So bigger undertaking than I thought, but that is coming. So stay tuned to that. You can always find out what is happening with that class or the lessons that we're putting up at the Academy by going to pestgeekpodcast.com and going to training. There you will find the Academy that is being built. And so we're working on that infrastructure, but this is a little bit more than I anticipated originally to get all this done. So letting you know about that. Also, hey, if you guys appreciate what we're doing here, you appreciate what I'm doing, what Steven Van Tassel is doing, trying to bring you the best free content and be the world's #1 pest control training podcast that is free. If you enjoy it, hey, would you consider donating, supporting us? It's easy. Just go to pestgeekpodcast.com. hit the donate button, and whatever you feel that this podcast is worth to you, go ahead and support us. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Guys, if your phone is not ringing, if you've been on the fence about getting maybe an 800 toll-free number, or maybe getting a vanity number, like 1-888 got bugs, or an easy to remember number like 1-800-600-500 to increase the ease of your customers getting a hold of you, contacting you, this is the time you might want to do this. Now, Ring Boost, which is one of the nation's largest provider of these services, came to us and said, hey, would you be interested in promoting this on your podcast? And of course I said yes. What he said is, hey, look, we're going to do a 15%. And if we're going to give you a custom page. So we've got our own page, which is, I'll tell you right now, ringboost.com/pest. If you put in pest 15 at checkout, you look for your number, get the number because you can do this right on their website. If you use our link and the promo code, which is pest 15, hey guys, you get 15% off. You can do the search right there, buy it right there online. And without further ado, here is Steven Van Tassel with today's topic.
Thanks, Frank. Steven Van Tassel here, bringing you another episode of Living the Wildlife. Continuing our session on skunks, and so this week, talking about skunk deodorizing, which is certainly something all of you should be concerned about if you're dealing with skunks. And I hope you are. Skunks are a great revenue source, and they're relatively easy to handle, but if you make mistakes, you will pay for such an event. So why don't we get started? But before I do, I guess I've been told that we haven't been having long enough podcasts. I guess some of you have been complaining that our podcasts are too short. Well, I'm certainly probably guilty of that. I tend to not believe in long sermons. Those of you who know me, that I'm a trained theologian and I preach, so I don't believe in long sermons. But certainly long teaching sessions. But it's certainly I got to leave enough for the next week to be sure. But I did tell Frank that I would be endeavoring to get out to about 30 minutes for my podcast. So keep your seatbelt on, eyes on the road, and hopefully you'll be listening carefully as we talk about skunk deodorizing. All right. Well, as you all know, skunks have incredibly powerful musk. And there's been some interesting research that's been done in the last, probably 40 or 50 years now. That's kind of clarified some things about skunk essence that you may not have known. One of the things we've learned, of course, is that skunk odor can be smelled at 10 parts per billion. That's with a B, billion. So it's an amazingly powerful thing. So if your client is complaining of skunk odor, you have to evaluate the intensity of that. And that's very difficult to do because they could smell a skunk that was hit by a car up to a mile away. So intensity is going to be important to see if this person just has a really good whiffer, or is it really something that they're handling on their property, or is it something next door? And you'll gain this over experience. Generally, if people are saying they're having trouble breathing and they're coughing and their eyes are watering and they can't stand it, and neighbors, people that meet them are smelling it on their clothes, then yeah, it's probably on their property. Now, it's important to understand about skunk essence that it doesn't leak from the skunk just because he walks by. It's not like Pepe Le Pew. I probably mentioned that in an earlier podcast. So they spray when they feel threatened or when they're sick. I've seen it. Skunks who are experiencing some sort of illness, whether it was rabies or distemper. I was involved in the Mid-Atlantic rabies epidemic that hit Massachusetts back in the early 90s. And so it spilled over. It was primarily in raccoons, but it did spill over into skunks. And so after we demonstrated that rabies was in the area through some testing, the city didn't want to pay for testing of all the animals I was picking up. So who knows what these skunks had. It's possible that some of them may have had distemper or could have been rabies or both. I mean, I don't think there's any reason why an animal couldn't have both. But my point is that sick skunks often can, because they're ill, they just sort of squirt everything else, so they can actually be empty when you arrive. So don't count on that, of course, and so you're going to need to be careful. But skunks only have about up to an ounce of this fluid inside of them, but that ounce is certainly powerful. And as older skunks, a colleague of mine said once, he thinks that older skunks know that they only have a limited amount, and so they use it cautiously, where younger skunks are certainly much more trigger happy, as we say. The skunk essence can temporarily blind people if it gets them in the eyes. It has some acidic qualities to it. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that it transmits rabies. But here's the problem. I mean, if a dog tangles with a skunk, how do you know the skunk didn't bite the dog? So the dog may have been sprayed, but the dog could have been sprayed and bitten. So you're going to have to navigate that issue. So skunk essence or musk consists of several key ingredients. Let's talk about some chemistry here. 6 of which are sulfur-containing thiols. It's spelled Thiols. And that's what gives the skunk essence its primary smell. And again, as I said before, you can smell these thiols at 10 parts per billion. Now, why are the thiols important? Because that is what is reactivated. Let's say you do a cleaning. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but I want you to understand this. You may have an incident with a skunk and the odor diminishes and goes away and you think you're clear, and then all of a sudden it rains or the humidity goes up and all of a sudden you smell it again. That's because those thiols, there's some residual thiols there that are interacting with the humidity. So that's perfectly normal. Expect it. Make sure you prepare your clients to understand that. It won't be the same intensity as it was before because it's beginning to degrade and break down, but you will get a little bit of a bump there that people will smell. So let's talk about the theory of what odor is and how it's transmitted, because in order to deodorize, you're going to need to understand the theory of odor control, because there's different ways of attacking odor. And so I'm not going to give you a single way to control skunk odor. I'm going to give you a shotgun or strategies that are going to help you with skunk odor, or deodorizing, I should say. So let's understand the triangle of odor. It's sort of like the triangle of fire. I know that's been changed now to a quadrigon or tetrahedron. But with skunks, we're just going to keep it simple and keep it to 3. And so you basically have, think of it like a triangle. So you have the source of an odor. Then you have the transmission of the odor, because when you smell something, you are actually smelling particles from that odorous source that are being transmitted through the air on, it could be on dust, various molecules, and so those odorous particles are being transmitted to your nasal passages, which then smells the presence of that odor. And then, of course, you have to have a receptacle, which would be your nose, a reception. So you have to have a source of an odor. It has to be transmitted through the air, on particles, and then ultimately someone has to be there. So the old question, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Well, the same way with an odor, if no one is there to smell it, who cares? So we're not trying to answer the philosophical question here. We're just saying, look, as a business owner, if a skunk dies in the woods and its bag breaks and no one's there to smell it, no one cares, right? So the point is that if you can remove any one or two of those portions of the triangle, the odor is no longer being perceived. So that means we have various strategies and tactics that can be used to control the skunk odor for your client and get them to a place where they can live with themselves and live inside their house and live in their property. Okay? So again, we have the source, we have the transmission, and we have the receptor, meaning our noses that we can smell it. So let's think about how that goes about. So in light of this, I'm going to list a few strategies here that are going to be used to control skunk odor. And so I'm going to give you 4. The first one would be to encapsulate. The second one would be to break down the chemical nature of the odor. The third is to remove the odor. And then 4th is to dilute the odor. All right, so let's talk about number 3 first, remove the odor. So again, we talked about how there's a source of an odor. So if you have a skunk that's died underneath a deck, well, if you can get underneath that deck and remove the carcass and the contaminated soil around that carcass, you are attacking the odor at the source. So if the source is gone, then the clients are going to experience a dramatic drop in the odor problem. Now, there's going to be some residual because, again, that skunk's been there for a while. But it's going to be it's like you put a fire out, the ashes may still be warm, but it's going to get colder and colder over time. That's how we can remove the source. Now, this is important, and you always want to try to do that whenever possible. If you can remove the source, so if someone's clothing has been sprayed or someone's dog has been sprayed, the last thing you want to do is to have that source contaminate new areas of the property or the house. But what happens is clients get stressed. Their dog has had an encounter with a skunk. They're frantic because, as we all know, dogs are the new furry children now. We love our dogs more than we love our kids. Yes, I'm being sarcastic, but you know that it's more true than it should be. And so that they're bringing these dogs into the house, and now we have two sources. We've had the original source where the dog was contaminated, and now we've moved that dog into the house, spreading that material. Then people are touching the dogs with their bare hands. They may get it on their clothing, and it's being spread all over the place. And so you can see how this can be a major contamination issue. So this is why when people have an encounter with a skunk, the first thing you have to do is do not cross-contaminate. Try to prevent that odor from spreading to new areas. Okay? Make sure that happens. So if a client doesn't do that, and of course they're not listening to you because as wildlife control operators and PCOs, you are called after there's a problem. No one calls you to prevent a problem, right? I mean, well, we were always called after the mistake has been made. So, but you need to understand that. But also, if your workers or yourself get sprayed, make sure you don't just simply hop into your vehicle, because now you're going to contaminate your vehicles. Because now you have two places you have to deodorize: yourself and your vehicle. Okay, so that's kind of the theory behind that. So that's removing the source and preventing cross-contamination. Another strategy to use to control odor is to encapsulate. Now, if you have a skunk, a dead body of a skunk, and it's making a bad smell, one of the strategies would be is simply bury it deep enough so that those odorous molecules can't reach the air. That's like encapsulating it. Now, you may say, well, that's not very practical. Well, where this occurs, if you're in a situation where, let's say there's an odor that's embedded into the sheetrock. And again, I'm trying to theorize here of a potential scenario. And so it doesn't have to be skunk odor, because this is all odor, right? So if there's an odor in the sheetrock, one of the things that you can do is, if you're not able to degrade that odor, is you simply apply a product onto the sheetrock that prevents the odor from leaving the sheetrock. Okay, so if it can't leave the sheetrock and fall into go into the basement or go into the rest of the house, you've encapsulated it. Is the odor source still there? Yes, but you've put a wall preventing that odor from being perceived, because there's no molecules being transmitted to the receptor. Now, very hard to do in many cases, right? But the point is, again, we're looking at strategies that you can use, because we need to have multiple tools in our toolbox, because situations change. Okay, so if you have a situation where maybe there's concrete or something porous and you're not able to tear it out of the wall, because that would be removal, right? I mean, if you have a contaminated wall or contaminated sheetrock, one option is simply break it out and throw it away. All right, that's removal. But let's say things are too expensive to do that. Well, another option would be, can you encapsulate the odor? Can you put a barrier up to prevent that odor from transmitting? I hope that makes sense. The third option that we're going to talk about is dilution. Now, dilution doesn't make people very happy, because they know it's still there and they still have to tolerate it for a while. But sometimes it's the best thing you can do. And so when you're dealing with someone's house, when you have skunks that have been living under a deck per se, and they've been there for a little while, maybe there's juveniles and they're squirting up the storm. I've had jobs where you could smell the skunk from the street, because the skunks were underneath the front porch, and when people walked out, the juveniles would start squirting up a storm, and it permeated this house. I could smell it from the street. You walk into the house, people could smell it on the third floor. I mean, it was amazing. One of the options, and you certainly want to do this, and that is part of the solution to pollution, is dilution. That if you can get those odorous molecules down below 10 parts per billion, remember that's with a B, 10 parts per billion, LION, parts per billion, then they can't smell it anymore. You've diluted it to a place where we can't perceive it. It's still there. It's going to degrade over time, but if the person can't perceive it, does it exist? No. I mean, it's for all practical purposes, because your job is not to verify that there's no more thiols in the air. You're not a chemist. Your job is to help your client get to a place where they can't smell the skunk odor anymore. And dilution is something you need to have in your toolbox. Now, how would you dilute? Well, people opening windows, airing things out, washing laundry, clothing. Make sure that they change their air filter in their furnace and air conditioner, because sometimes that's contaminated and people still think the odor's around when in fact that's what's spreading that odor throughout the house. So you keep diluting it out, air things out. It's dilution. Another aspect of dilution, and I'm going to actually make it a fifth option for you, and that is masking. So you can mask the odor by simply having them burn, scented candles, use air fresheners to try to mask the odor. Now, masking, it has to be something that they like to smell, and they have to understand that it's not, all you're doing is you're overlaying one odor with another. That's kind of how tomato juice works. And by the way, tomato juice doesn't work. Tomato juice, people think it works because when you're smelling skunk odor, your nasal passages are so overwhelmed with the odor, they're desperate for something new. So when you open up tomato juice, the nose smells the tomato juice and gives up the odor of the skunk, even though the skunk odor is still there. So if you have a new person walk into the room, they're going to smell the skunk because their nose hasn't been overwhelmed yet. Think of it like nose blindness. You may have seen commercials to this effect. Well, a way to understand nose blindness is if you have children or something and the children make certain noises and they do it repeatedly, after a while you train yourself to tune that out where you don't even notice it anymore. So if you have a new person walking into the house and like, what's all that noise? And you're like, what noise? The noise is there. You've just disciplined yourself not to perceive it anymore. Okay? So we have encapsulation, we have removal, we have dilution, we have masking, and then we have breaking it down. Now, breaking it down is when you use a product that actually breaks up the chemical formula of the skunk essence. Now, that is the holy grail, because if you're able to disrupt the chemical formula, then you disrupt its odorous qualities. Okay? But it's rare. I mean, there's not many things that will do that. Okay, but thankfully with skunk essence, we do have some. Okay, so far for the 20 minutes that I've been talking here about, I've been giving you the theory of odor control. Okay, that you have to have a source, you have to have a receptor, you have to have the transmitter, and then I've talked about strategies that you would use to deodorize, which would be to encapsulate, remove, dilute, mask, and break down. Okay? So now that is the theory. So we're now going to move to some of the products that you can use to treat various types of skunk odor. And you say, well, what do you mean by various types of skunk odor? Well, I break down skunk odor into two major categories: spot odor and generalized odor. Spot odor is the skunk that died under someone's deck. You know where the source is. You can point to it. But when you're walking into someone's house and the odor is permeating the house, that is not it. You can't point to it because it's everywhere. So let's deal with the first spot one first. So if a dog has been sprayed, or you know the exact location of where the skunk sprayed or the skunk has died, here is a product that you would want to consider. And that is, this one actually breaks down the skunk essence at its source. You may have heard this formula. It works. It was discovered by, I think, Dr. Kraybaum, who was a chemist, and he was looking for a way to deodorize and wanted to market it. Unfortunately, all these products are over the counter, and so he couldn't do it. But anyways, here it is. Here's the formula. 1 quart of 3% hydrogen peroxide. That's the stuff you just go to your local drugstore or grocery store and pick up. A 1/4 cup of baking soda, like the Arm & Hammer is a brand of baking soda, right? Sodium bicarbonate is also what it's called. And then 1 to 2 teaspoons, or perhaps you just use a tablespoon, of liquid dish soap. Now, the liquid, does it matter which liquid dish soap do you use? Not really, but there has been some who say that Dawn works better because of its superb grease cutting capabilities. Because you see, skunk essence has an oily structure to it. So you need something to help break that oil down to allow the hydrogen peroxide and baking soda to do its thing. These, when you mix it together, you're going to mix it in the bucket fresh. Don't seal it and store it. So what some people do is they have little Ziploc bags that will have the hydrogen peroxide inside of it. They'll keep it in the container because that brown container is there for a reason, so the sun doesn't get at it, right? And then they have a little box of baking soda, and then they have some liquid dish soap, and they have it in a little bucket, and that way they can always have it as a kit ready to make fresh. You would apply this at the source of where you found the odor. If you have a dog, you can apply it to the dog. Just keep it away from the dog's eyes and mouth. If you have it on yourself, you can use it on yourself. Understand that the hydrogen peroxide can bleach some of the clothing. So if you're going to use it on a carpet or something, try it in a small area. You can also dilute it with some extra water. That may help reduce that likelihood. But you can have some bleaching qualities with it if you're using it on fabrics. It works great. If you need to apply it again, you apply it again. Sometimes you may have a heavy dose and you need to do it again. Can you use it on clothing in the laundry? Yes, you can. It's recommended that you allow the washing machine to fill. That way, when you're putting the product in, the mixed product in, you're able to dilute it a little bit more. But again, always consider the possibility there may be some bleaching of your fabric there. But, people may not care, right? Because the alternative may be to just throw it out. So it's a shot, okay? That is your go-to. All of you should probably have this product in your truck as a kit, so in case something bad happens. But there are other options for you, okay? Again, that is for site-based odor, where you know where the location is, okay? Now, there are various professional products available, so let's talk about some of these. Neutrolium Alpha, that's Neutroleum, second word alpha, like alpha is the Greek letter, alpha. ALPHA. It's a registered product, and it basically masks skunk odor, but it does a really good job masking that out. It has a minty, fresh smell, so it may be something that you may want to look into. I've talked to people from USDA Wildlife Services, and they like it. But it does mask the odor, but again, that may be something that you need. You can mix it with some warm water, and it will deodorize washable items, so you can look at the label for that. Another product that's available is called Fresh Wave, all one word, Fresh, wave as in the ocean, WAVE, all one word, Fresh Wave. That's the retail version of an industrial deodorant known as EcoSorb, ECOSORB, EcoSorb. And what it does is it actually has compounds that actually encapsulate. Remember, we talked about encapsulation as an odor. So its porous structure allows the odorous molecules to be wrapped in this particular product, so it's no longer can be smelled. It's actually used to deodorize oil tankers. So you can imagine, raw oil is pretty noxious stuff, and it's actually used in the cleaning of those structures so that you don't have this massive oil smell going over the harbor. Okay, so it is available at various locations as well, but you can look that up. There's even I think a candle version of it that can be burned. So if you have an area where you have lingering odors in a room, Fresh Wave is a product that is really suitable for more diffused odor, and I do believe it can be used inside of an atomizer. So you can look into that as well. If you are going to use it on organisms like dogs or things, make sure you keep it away from eyes, because I guess it can burn the eyes. Another product available is called Epoleon. It neutralizes skunk essence, and so it can be mixed and reduced, diluted, I should say, at 1 part to 20 parts per water at a 1:5 or a 1:5 ratio, depending on how bad the odor is. You can use it. There is a version of it that has a stain-free treatment version. And that's going to be capital N, small n, capital Z. That's Epoleon NNZ that you can look into. And again, those are some products. You want to do your research on this, and I encourage you to look into things before you need them. I know that may be odd, and because as good Americans, we never do anything to prepare. We always wait till there's a crisis, but always do it before you have a problem. And, try it out, because you're going to be having situations where the back of your truck's smelling a little rank, and you may want to just sort of say, well, how does this Epoleon product work? And you can just test it in your back of your truck. Always follow the label, of course. Label is the law, label is the law, label is the law. Okay. Another product that's available that has been used in relationship with skunk essence is Nissis's Bacazap. It's a commercial grade deodorizer that uses various products to both mask and encapsulate and degrade organic compounds that occur with skunk essence. Don't use it where there's food. So this is one of the challenges, because if you're dealing with diffuse areas, which is going to be the most complicated part of your work, you want to try to think about how are there going to be issues with the product that I'm using? Am I going to cure the odor, and then the client's going to complain they have headaches because of what you sprayed? Do you see where I'm going with this? So you want to try to use as little product as possible. You want to keep people out of the house. You want to make sure you're very careful if working around food utensil items. Are they packaged up? So one of the things, you never want to violate the label. Okay, so that's number one. How good is your insurance? Is your insurance able to? Are you insured for deodorizing? Because now you're not just putting bait down in a bait station. You are fogging a room if you're using some of these atomizers. Now, granted, you're using small amounts of chemical here. That's why you're atomizing. Atomizing increases the surface area of the product, allowing you to use less product for better coverage. But all you need is one person complaining that, I've got an allergy now, or I have a rash, I've got a headache, I'm not feeling well, am I poisoning myself with this product? So you need to be very careful. So a lot of wildlife control operators won't use any of these atomizable products inside of the living space. They may use it in an attic. They may use it in a crawl space. But many will not use it inside of the living space of a house. You're going to need to make a judgment call on how you're going to do that. I would encourage you to discuss this with the manufacturer, because this is kind of still a moving target, because you may say, well, what does the industry have? Well, unfortunately, the industry doesn't have a lot of clear standards yet. I've tried to create some, but you know how wildlife control operators are. Do they really like rules? Do they like standards? I think you already know the answer to that. So be careful. So check out some of those atomizers. Atomizers are certainly going to be useful. They're going to reduce the amount of product that you're using. You're going to have better coverage, better control. So definitely look into that. I call them atomizers, but they can also be called electric foggers and atomist sprayers. And so there's some really good products available out there. In several of these, you can't use it with the hydrogen peroxide product, but many of your professional products can be diluted and put through an atomizer. Some will actually will tell you how to do that. But certainly atomizing reduces the amount that you're using, and which is always a good thing. When we're using less product, that's better. But don't ignore these other tactics that I've talked about, that is preventing cross-contamination. Can you remove products? Can you remove the odor source? Can you dilute it? Can you mask it? Okay. So when you're going into using an atomizer to control an odor situation, get your ducks in a row. Talk to your insurance company. Talk to the manufacturer. Read the SDS label. Read the product label. Try to use as minimum as possible. Keep people away. Think of it like it's a toxic chemical, even if it's not. Okay, and I think that's going to always err on the side of caution. I'm kind of a nervous Nelly when it comes to lawsuits. And I think if more people are, we would reduce a lot of problems in advance. What do you charge? Well, I'm not going to talk about that today. I've already gone over my 30 minutes here, so I've fulfilled my obligation for today. But I hope you found this information to be helpful. Think about the theory of odor control and the strategies that you're going to use to deodorize it, and then check out some of those products that I listed. If you're saying, Stephen, I couldn't get all this down, here's what you do. Just Google my name, Van Tassel. That's V as in Victor, ANTASSEL, Van Tassel, all one word. There's very few of us in the world. Van Tassel. Van like the truck, tassel like graduation, all one word. And then Skunk deodorizing or Skunk odor. Put those 3 words together, Google it, and my publication will come up, and you'll have it all in print for you, and it'll get you started on the way. I'm sure we're going to be learning more. Love to get some feedback from you in terms of your experiences. Would be appreciate to get it. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. I'm Stephen Van Tassel, Wildlife Control Consultant, hoping you're living the wildlife and making money doing it. Back to you, Frank.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.